I mentioned a moment ago that sometimes we get weary in the journey, and it affects our attitude, it affects our disposition, it affects our people, our ability to interact with people. And we've taken a great note of that in the construction industry in recent years. And our next speaker has done a fabulous job of addressing it, of not only noticing it and assessing it, but whose company has given her support to address it. And I'm going to ask Amanda Finnegan, if she would, to begin to make her way to the stage with me. She is the Senior HSE Manager with Jacobs. And she has leveraged her construction management experience and logic to drive Jacobs beyond zero culture and to create excellence and inspiring the organization to think higher, to think more deeply about health, safety, and well-being. She's got over 25 years in our business. She spent a long time in Alaska, primarily in the oil and gas sectors. But today she's going to give us a unique spin on a major challenge and what we can begin to do individually and collectively to address it. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Amanda to the stage. Amanda, come ahead.
Hey.
It's good to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Sure. Let me get out of your way. I'm anxious to hear what you have to say.
All right, thanks. And thank you, Kurt, for allowing me to come and talk about mental health today. But before I get started, we're actually going to kick everything off with a video. So hopefully we can get that going. So I'm just wondering if anybody in the room has heard of 1 Million Lives. I am seeing just a few hands. I'm not surprised. It's fairly new, but it is the culmination of what we've been doing at Jacobs. So a little bit about my journey. So Amanda Finnegan, HSE manager, and I'm the Mental Health Matters lead for Jacobs in the Americas. I didn't start in mental health. I actually went to college in Texas for an animal behavior degree. It's biopsych, but after a couple years filming the mating behavior of wasps, I learned that really wasn't for me, especially because I'm allergic. But so then I followed that up by going to Montana Tech and got a degree in health and safety. Really, I found that my passion is around helping people and making sure that they're safe and caring about people. So after that, I went to Alaska and spent the bulk of my career oil and gas, as Greg mentioned, and construction. And it was the best and worst job I've ever had. It was really, really challenging, but it was really worth it. So I ended up moving down to Colorado And CH Chilm Hill was the company I was with at the time, and we were acquired by Jacobs. And that's when I learned that Jacobs has this mental health program. That's something that CH did not have. I continued supporting safety until the pandemic, and that's when Paul Hendry, our vice president of health and safety, moved me over into the mental health program. And so I've spent the last several years coaching and mentoring employees on how they can help other employees. We have a peer-to-peer network called Positive Mental Health Champions. And so we spend a lot of our time as volunteers confidentially supporting each other. And that has been very successful, but still a big part of our program has been this 1 million lives. I'm also married with 2 kids, 12 and 14. We'd go to a lot of live music, and that picture's me forcing them to go see a band of my youth, so clearly I'm the most excited one there. So why are we doing this? There's all the nice reasons across the top. It's the humanitarian efforts, strengthening social capital, just, again, caring about people. But what it comes down to is 1 in 4 people worldwide are affected by a mental health condition. So when you are in a group of people or in a meeting, and just think about those numbers, that 1 in 4 are probably struggling from a mental health condition, or maybe they're thriving with a mental health condition. That's where we would really like to be, is just understanding where people are. I really liked yesterday when Greg Sizemore had everybody raise their hand if they have been affected by or know people that are affected by mental health conditions, and for more than half the room to raise their hand. I think probably 10 years ago, people wouldn't even raise their hand, even if they knew they wouldn't, because people just aren't comfortable with it, and we're getting more and more comfortable sharing our experiences. And then you look at the business case for this. So it's not just always, for me, it's about people, but for a business, you have to make money. So you have to understand how much it's going to be costing us for these mental health conditions, $16 trillion by 2030. But then there's also, if you look at the side of investment, for every $4 invested, or there's a $4 return for every $1 invested in these mental health conditions. So this is something, as mentioned yesterday by Greg and Jim, this isn't going away, and this is something we really need to address, and we want to be in the forefront of it. People are starting to look for well-being and mental health programs in their organizations when they're looking for jobs. So while there's a war on talent, we're struggling to find people, just know that this is something that people are really looking for when they're doing their job searches. And we retain people, 28% higher employee retention rates. It's so much easier and less expensive to retain our employees and take care of them than trying to find that new talent. So while we all have different reasons, all of them come out being positive for the employees. So exploring our mental landscapes. These are all the locations that Jacobs operates. And being a global company has a lot of benefits, but it also has challenges, especially when we're dealing with mental health conditions and trying to talk about mental health conditions and getting people the right benefits. So Australia, very progressive, amazing programs. People actually talk openly about mental health and mental health conditions. Same with Europe. But when we want to support our employees that are in the Middle East, we're not allowed to have the same kind of conversations. So we need to be culturally sensitive. And even in the US, it was mentioned yesterday, generationally sensitive, because we're all coming from a different place with different experiences. So there's a lot of information on this slide, so you do get these slides if you want to be able to look at them, but we're going to talk a little bit about Jacob's mental health journey and how we got to where we are. So there was an employee that was a part of the HSE team, and very hard worker, very well liked. But periodically he would just disappear. He'd be gone from work for a couple of weeks. And then he'd come back and he'd be, focused, the hard worker that every company wants, everybody likes to work with. And then a few months later, he'd disappear again for a few weeks. And it would happen fairly frequently. And so the organization was thinking, this might not be a good fit. You think, well, is he off being lazy? What is he doing? He's a challenge to work with. Maybe he's not dependable. But instead of taking those HR actions, the team decided to better understand why Glenn was gone. And it was because he had mental health struggles. So the team really strove to understand his struggles and what they could do. So they developed a program, the Positive Mental Health Champion program that I mentioned at the beginning, and trained 12 people. And their goal is to peer-to-peer support confidentially other employees. And as people heard about the program, more and more people wanted to be trained. It became very successful very quickly because people really did like to understand what was happening with their coworkers, with their family members on the mental health side. And we're not training clinicians. None of us are trained professionals. We're just there to listen and to help and to signpost people to the benefits that they need. So that was very successful. In 2017, the organization actually decided to put together a strategy and say, we are going to help our employees' mental health. It was just a one-pager. It didn't have a lot of information. It didn't even have any detail, but that was what was so important, is that the organization said, we are going to try and help our employees. We took that first step. And so that commitment turned into some procedures. And procedures are not fun, but once things are written down, then we're able to kind of follow them, and we have the guiding documents to help. So by 2018, we had over 1,000 champions trained. And this isn't an easy journey, getting leadership to commit to putting in the hours that are necessary for the training, and then the hours that are necessary for all the conversations people are having about their mental health. It's expensive. And then we needed more money. So Paul Hendry went to our CEO and said, our champions are drowning. We need to do more. We're being so reactive. We need to be proactive with our employees' health. And so that's where 1 Million Lives developed. And the challenges that come with that, you have to have a leader that is engaged. And Steve Demetrio came right out and said, 4 of my 6 children have mental health struggles. I know how important it is. I know how much it affects, a family, a workforce. So yes, I do support it, which was amazing to be able to bring the program over to the United States, but then also start developing the 1 Million Lives program. So by 2020, this 1 Million Lives check-in tool that you saw the video at the beginning, it was ready. They had piloted it over in Australia. It had a lot of positive feedback, but we're a US-based company. And we weren't necessarily ready for this kind of commitment. And to be honest, our legal department absolutely was not ready for this kind of commitment. We're a risk-averse organization, so it took a little bit more time to try and get everybody on board, jump through some hoops to make sure that it was okay to ask people how they were doing. Then the pandemic hit. And so it was actually the perfect time to try and roll out the 1 Million Lives program. So we were able to do so, just kind of, internally and externally, kind of a soft launch back in 2020. And then we also started these resiliency calls. You'll see a part of one later on. And it was mentioned in The Voice that I read yesterday. I believe a lot of you still have the magazine. There's investing in well-being. So taking it beyond mental health, in 2023, we hired a VP of well-being. So not just focusing on mental health and mental illness and mental wellness, we expanded it to all the different pillars of well-being, whether that's physical, emotional, financial, because you want to look at the whole person when they come to work. So that's something that we've just started doing, and I believe is absolutely the right direction, as mentioned in that article and The Voice as well. So bringing it back to safety, again, I'm an HSE professional. At Jacobs, we have our Beyond Zero brand. and that's our HSE brand, but part of that is the culture of caring. So you need kind of a balance. You need the policies and the procedures, and you can see our timeline headed towards 0 injuries with Jacobs and our managed contractors. But throughout this, you see where we've been adding in mental health along the way. It's a really good fit in the HSE organization because we do care about employees. And that is one point. A lot of the well-being programs and mental health programs are often based in HR, and we took a different approach to have them in the HSE department. I love our HR partners. They're amazing individuals, but a lot of times, especially in construction, they're the ones that do the hiring and the firing. So to be able to get somebody in the construction industry to go to an HR person and say, I'm struggling with my mental health, they're not necessarily comfortable doing so because this is the person that's going to, potentially let people go somewhere along the lines. I don't want to be seen as weak. So within the HSE organization, we can keep these things confidential, but again, people come to us to point out things. This is unsafe. I feel unsafe. I'm not feeling well. I'm not here today because mentally I have this going on at home. And so people are fairly comfortable coming to HSE and our Beyond Zero culture of caring. So back to 1 million lives. So what this is an online application. It's not an app you download onto your phone. So you can go to it on your phone or on a computer and you set up an account for yourself. And it's anonymous. There's no way that we can identify who it is. We don't ask for emails. The only identifying, you get to create your own login, which could be, cats and my password, and they're not going to be able to bring that back. Well, maybe me, but I have 4 cats. There's no other way that you can bring the information back to people. So it's giving people the anonymity that they need to try and get their mental health taken care of. So once you set up an account, it will ask you things like, are you a Jacobs employee? We have partnered with a lot of different organizations, and you're able to do a drop down and pick that organization and say you're a member of that organization. And then some information on male, female, your age group, those kinds of things, to be able to at least help us identify which groups could potentially be struggling and which ones could potentially be flourishing. How do we use this data? So this was developed with the help of mental health professionals. So while the champions and a lot of us in the organization that are spearheading all of this, we aren't mental health professionals. We partnered with Peta Slocum, and she helped us put this together. So when you go to the doctor and they ask you a list of questions on, if you're not feeling well, are you depressed? There's a few questions, and it's called the Kessler K10, and that's what we have it based off of. So the kinds of things that it measures are psychological distress, social support, social media use. And so after you complete a check-in, you can do a short or a long one. If you do a longer check-in, it does take about 15 minutes. It comes out with, you can look on the screen exactly, this is how this person rated. Fair for sleep. I usually get probably the same. Psychological distress, and it's how you answered it. And so this can be very helpful because you can take this information and it'll give you resources. Okay, you struggle with sleep, here's some resources. You're struggling with resilience, here's some resources. And that way you can take the mental health into your own hands. It takes a lot of courage for people to go see a mental health professional and to try and seek counseling. This helps people determine, do I need additional help? Maybe I'm okay, and you can you can check your status weekly, monthly, annually. We kind of recommend people check in periodically, so not just when you're struggling. I'm really bad at this because I always end up, if I'm not feeling quite right, I'll do a check-in, and then I can see, okay, I got to lay off social media use or work on my sleep. But if you do it when you're feeling good, you know what your baseline is. Another way that this can help is you can take this information and go to a doctor, and now you've got a way to start a conversation. I took this test. I feel like I'm not doing well. And that's kind of hard to say. It really is. And so to be able to take this information, go seek professional care, at least you've got the conversation started. So what kind of information are we getting out of this? So Jacobs gets, again, the data, we can't tell who the people are, but males are equally as likely to check in as females. So this is huge because the male population doesn't tend to seek help and come out openly with mental health struggles, especially in construction. So to get people to take care of their mental health equally is incredibly valuable as a tool. What else are we finding? We're finding the 18 to 25-year-olds are struggling the most. This was especially high during the pandemic, but even coming out of the pandemic, it's been a challenge. They have high psychological distress, high social media use, and low resiliency. We've been able to see that the older group, 55 and older, are coping the best. So low social media use, low psychological distress, and high resiliency. And we're able to pull this live data. And again, we share this we've partnered with a lot of organizations, so we're able to give them the data as well. Data is king. So we do really have to make a case for, is this working? Why is Jacob spending so much money on this program that is free to everybody? We do not charge people. We will never make money off of this program. We're asking people share far and wide. You can use it how you would like, but we're never going to commercialize this program. So taking the data, what are we doing? We're prioritizing the under 35 age group to return to the office. But we have to understand what that means. That flexible work environment is incredibly important to that generation. So we're trying to maintain the flexibility, but then understanding that they need to be back around people. And we've created a mentoring program for them. So this is where we went to HR and said, hey, we need help. This is the group that is struggling per our 1 million lives data. Let's put together a program and help build their resilience. Let's build their network so that they can come back to work and be their whole selves. We've been investing in the Mental Health Matters program and our employee networks. Coming back to the office and feeling like you're comfortable at work, these employee networks have become incredibly valuable for people feeling like they belong, whether it's veterans talking to other veterans for support, women in the workforce. We have a women's network. So we have 8 different networks, and those really help support our employees. Developed internal suicide prevention training. So we do have individuals that work operations and maintenance and some construction work, and we're on a lot of construction sites. So we're very aware of the high suicide rates in construction. So we developed an internal training. It's based off of Zero Suicide Alliance, and it's scenario-based because it teaches you how to have a conversation with a friend if they're potentially suicidal, a coworker, or a stranger. These scenarios really do help people just know what the right thing is to say. It's so uncomfortable and it's so awkward trying to have this conversation with somebody you don't know how they're gonna react, and this training was incredibly valuable. But we're also promoting the self-help aspect of the 1 Million Lives check-in tool. Again, this is where you can go on your own time and take your mental health into your own hands. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, being global, there are a lot of challenges with different regions and what our mental health needs are. So we're able to use the information from our employee assistance program and tailor the needs to our regions, whether or not it's elder care, financial support. We're able to focus on that and put our efforts there. And this last one's still what we're working on. Establish a professional Jacobs care team. Anybody who's tried to get help as far as counseling or going to a psychiatrist probably knows how challenging it is to find a provider. And so even though we have this amazing employee assistance program, it can be a challenge to find somebody that's got availability. So we were able to work with our provider to get dedicated counselors just for our employees, and we pay for the first 8 sessions. And so people are able to, they can either go within Jacobs to our 2 providers and we just break down those barriers. Because again, if somebody's finally asking for help, we need to get rid of the barriers and we need to make it a lot easier for them. So we'd really like to have this professional Jacobs care team and bring some of those resources in-house to be able to help people. So that's one of the asks we're working on. So when we rolled out 1 million lives, I said at the beginning it was kind of a soft launch. And it was something where we just slowly started building momentum. And in 2022, on October 10th, and again in 2023 on October 10th, that's World Mental Health Day, we have the world's biggest mental health check-in. And actually, I know Kurt sent the information out to their mailing list this year just to try and get people to be a part of the Ripple. And what we ask people to do is check in on themselves, share the information, to have your friends, families, neighbors check in on themselves. So I've got another video.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's call and taking part in the world's biggest mental health check-in. And thank you to our partners and the team who made this possible. It's really powerful stuff.
What did a shaft of light mean? So we put it into AI, and this is what a shaft of light means. It's a sign that things are getting better. It's a reminder that there's still good in the world. It's a source of strength and inspiration, and it's a reason to keep going.
And we actually saw a big uptake on people dying by suicide in Australia. And that's when I really started to see industry coming together, the industries that we work in, certainly coming together to focus on mental health.
Often, particularly around mental health, when we see things like, depression and anxiety, but lots of kind of high stress situations, it literally becomes like a fog for people. It becomes a fog, or it becomes a blanket for some people, and it's dark and it's heavy.
I was a bit surprised, to be honest. I almost redone the check-in because I wasn't happy with the results. But when I looked at it and I started actually thinking about what it was telling me, I could actually understand that it was telling me that I did have low mood and I had to make some kind of lifestyle change.
I wanted to really focus on the definition that we got at the beginning, because it really does describe what our positive mental health champions are as a shaft of light.
One of our staff reckoned that 1 million lives saved their life. This is really, really important that people do check their mental health, because it could be saving a life. So if we go back to Bob's point about like sharing this check-in or some check-in, as long as someone is having the conversation and checking in, then it could be potentially saving lives.
And that first shaft of light, as with any first shaft of light, is absolutely everything. And the ability to have some structure and some words, and then those words allow you to have conversations, and then those conversations allow you to start taking one step at a time.
By making it more accessible and by translating it, we've actually got 1 million lives in 102 countries. And when we produced this graphic last week, I think it was, honestly blown away. I think what we've done and what people on this call have done by being that Ripple is we've addressed some of the kind of inequality from a health perspective, access to resources, support that maybe isn't available to everyone. So I just want to thank everybody in the call for sharing it.
So a lot has happened in the past 12 months, and Alex and I have come, a fairly long way, I would consider to be, from one of the hardest years that both of us had. And what we're covering today in terms of one shaft of light that shows the way really does encapsulate the past 12 months. Look, I'm certain that it was through continually checking in and asking the questions around how he was feeling that Alex finally admitted he doesn't feel right and that he needs help.
the shaft of light, I picked that up, and it's just perfect metaphor for what we do as a charity as well. Being the lighthouse construction industry charity, it just fits in beautifully. But we are 100% dedicated to looking after the well-being and welfare of the workforce.
You know, I often sort of think about that phrase, a rising tide lifts all boats. And so this is a topic absolutely where a rising tide lifts all boats. This is a great opportunity for us to think about how we all become leaders to support our people in our industry. So I just think it's fantastic, the momentum that has been built around this day. Just absolutely fantastic.
If you haven't yet, please use our 1 Million Lives tool to check in on your mental health today. Additionally, I encourage you to send this check-in to 5 of your family members, friends, or colleagues so they can do the same.
So what you were just listening to is one of our resiliency calls on mental health, World Mental Health Day. We have those every year. But these resiliency calls are separate from 1 Million Lives, and they're something that were born out of the pandemic, where we were able to use the data from 1 Million Lives and the EAP and hit topics that somewhat are taboo. What we would do is, you heard Paul Hendry, he's our VP from Scotland, and he brings a team on. And again, most of the people aren't mental health professionals, they're people with a story. And we do have some professionals that come on, and then leadership. It's important to have leadership support on those calls. And we just talk about whatever the topic may be, loneliness, stress, suicide. And the ripple from those calls has been phenomenal. We've had 75,000 people call into them, about 5,000 per call, and we have them in 2 time zones. And what makes it so powerful is it's people telling stories. And then people are more comfortable. And then we're reducing that stigma. So while those are terrifying calls to be on with such a huge audience, they're unscripted. You don't know what Paul's gonna say. That has really been what's so powerful about them, because people wanna listen, and then they say in the chat, this was so helpful for me. I'm struggling in this area too. And so then we can give people the resources. They took a little while for people to feel comfortable on them, but they've been very powerful. So again, what we focus on is the ripple effect. We've got some of the timeline that I talked about before, and then we started the mental health calls in 2020. Those first 1 Million Lives external launch, 12,000 plus check-ins. And then we had our first world's biggest mental health check-in in 22. 17,000 people checked in, or check-ins, and then we had over 9,000 call in to our resiliency calls. 40 plus organizations. So this is when we really started to share the information and say it's free, share it on World Mental Health Day, use it, share it with your employees, families, friends. And then over 1 million hashtags in social media. And that was a 6-week effort. So push to 2023, we focused just on the week of Mental Health Month, and we still had 13,000 plus check-ins. And over 2 million uses on social media. And we've expanded. You saw on the call, it was 102 countries. 108 countries were reached during the check-in. And again, we only operate in 40. So to be able to expand that far shows the power of people just really wanting a way to check in on themselves and something that's easy for them that can be very powerful. So some of the data, and I won't go too in depth with a lot of this. Age and gender. So if you look at the gender, it's almost 50-50, and that's what we've been finding consistently through all of our data. And the age range. We say that the younger generations are the ones that are struggling, and those are the ones that are also checking in the most. So specific to the check-ins, again, the full check-in measures all the clinical data, the distress, sleep, resilience, And the quick check-in is just kind of your general well-being, and that one only takes 2 minutes tops. So we're finding that people, for the longer check-in, the more clinical kind of diagnoses, people are fair. They're kind of languishing, but a lot of people are doing good. So we do like to see that. But the quick check-ins, people generally in their general well-being, I'm not feeling great, just answer a few questions and move on. But again, either of the check-ins, you're still linked to the resources that you need. Year to year, we're seeing pretty similar data. And if anybody wants to delve into data, I can meet with you after. I know data's not everybody's thing, but we do need to utilize our data, business case, but also to try and figure where we're going to focus in on the majority of our efforts. And then this is the tough one. Have you ever had thoughts of suicide or self-harm, even if you don't intend to act on them? 37% said yes, overall. And if you look, it's the younger generations that are struggling the most. And then have you ever been diagnosed with a mental health condition? 27% say yes. And we think that number's a little bit low because a lot of folks don't necessarily go and get a diagnosis. So we have this amazing program where our client wants to be world-class. They want to just, when people are looking for a job, this is where they want to work. And so that client said, I'd love to bring in a well-being lead or specialist. They did a survey and asked people a bunch of different questions. General well-being, again, there's multiple areas, whether it's financial, physical, emotional, and they got a lot of really good data. The information said, oh, we would really like help on the physical pillar. We're here working all day. We never have a chance to go to the gym. How can we work towards that? Or financial. I've got kids that are going to go to college. I'm taking care of my parents. And so we had really good follow-up on those. And so when we came in, we said, well, this is wonderful. Can we ask some questions on mental health? I'd love to see where we can help this construction workforce. And they said nobody answered the questions. They were there. And that is so telling because it means, first of all, that people aren't comfortable talking about mental health. Maybe they don't trust the system or the anonymity of these, the questions that we're asking. So for this well-being lead, she was able to come in and have a good understanding where she needed to go, what she needed to focus on, and really reduce the stigma that's associated with talking about mental health. And they're making great strides on that program. It's going to be interesting to see, about a year in, all the progress that they've made, but people are more comfortable now talking about their mental health. And I bring that up because this program did have suicides already on the program. So having a client try and bring that information and be proactive was incredibly positive. So we do it for the numbers, we do it for the data, but we really do it for the people and the stories. So that's where, back to where, my purpose with this program is we get story after story after story. There's not a lot of data that you can track that people say it saved my life. I didn't know how to talk to my wife about it, and then I was able to take this check-in, have her take this check-in, and have a discussion and get some help. And we have multiple stories. You saw some of them on the video as well. But this is why we do it, and this is why we know we're making a difference with the 1 Million Lives and our mental health program as a whole. So before I go into the Q&A, I took some notes yesterday after being here for a little bit. First of all, I think it's incredible that we're starting to have the conversation around mental health and construction. It's something that we really need to do. Again, it's a challenge. I find myself in meetings, oh, what do you do? I'm here to talk about mental health, and people kind of get a little anxious about it. But you don't need to be a mental health professional to talk about mental health. To get started at your organization, you need to first make a commitment. Find that person that's going to spearhead it, whether it's an HSE, an employee that has a story to tell, and bring them in because their powerful stories and their passion are what you need to be able to help the program. And then just say you're going to do it. Again, the power behind Jacobs has been a lot of people that aren't mental health professionals. So where do you start? You can start with those surveys. You can start with just having the conversation. You can bring in professionals from the beginning, but it can be expensive. And actually, I'm curious, how many organizations in this room have a mental health program or a well-being program? I've heard some really good ones lately. That's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful for the construction industry. So lean on each other. Like Jacobs, we've done a lot of the work. We want you to be able to use 1 million lives. If you want to partner with us and get your name as a drop-down and then get the data, just reach out to me, and we can absolutely do that. Then it just really breaks down the barriers of having to take those first steps. We've done this for you. Learning about the sprints yesterday, and I love that it's now safety, health, and wellness. Maybe under that we could have a sprint that's on mental health. There's so many resources out there, it can be so overwhelming. If a few people get together, we can put all that information out there for you. There's guides. The Health Action Alliance does an amazing job giving free resources to businesses to further mental health. And again, this is free. So we want people to be able to utilize it and start progressing the mental health journey for your organizations. So I would love some Q&A if we've got any questions.
First of all, let's show our appreciation to Amanda.
Thanks.
Thank you, Amanda. And by the way, some of you may have seen in your materials that Paul Hendry, who was referenced in the video, was supposed to be with us. And he's actually in Scotland. His dad is an extremist, so keep Paul in your thoughts and prayers. That can be very taxing as well. Amanda, you hit it out of the ballpark.
Thank you.
We've got a ton of questions, and so let's get started. You mentioned your legal team took some issue early on the development of the mental health program. Can you share any lessons learned on how Jacobs was able to get past that legal issue? What were some of the issues that caused them to pause?
So initially, asking somebody if they're struggling mentally and not being able to take action was the initial challenge that we have. So you had to put additional information in the program to get people the resources if they immediately need care. So if somebody's in a crisis situation, we need to get them crisis resources. So just being able to ask somebody those questions and then not be there for them in person to support them was something that was a challenge for our legal team.
How did you overcome it?
By adding the information into the program as far as giving them immediate help if they need it. Here's your resources. So we have information for every country on what their suicide prevention and their hotline calls are. So we were able to add that and give them more resources because we have to maintain the anonymity.
Thank you. Also, you'll notice microphones are here around the room. If you have a question, you'd like to go live with your question, just raise your hand, and one of these fine folks will recognize you, and we'll take your question. Sir, go right ahead. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you. Great discussion. And it starts with conversations. You're absolutely right. I remember our journey, just even with safety, talking about leading indicators. Mm-hmm. People were saying, oh, we don't do that. We can't do that. Exactly. And when you get to sponsorship, and you do get the right sponsorship, I'd just like to have you talk a little bit more about that, because in the end, celebrating those success stories and everything like that, it's amazing how many resources are available after a suicide happens or something like that happens. Those resources are available before that, too.
They are.
How do we do a better job of making that visible, and then also, too, making sure that we go ahead and we do take that action?
Great question. We do struggle with getting our benefits out there. We'd like to see our utilization to be quite a bit higher. The Positive Mental Health Champion Network is now at about 2,500 employees, and our job is culture of caring moments, safety moments at the beginning. We talk about what our benefits are, and we get the information out there. Also in our signposting, so when employees come to us to just talk, vent, we get them to the right resources. So it's a bit of a challenge, and it's very time consuming. I got up early this morning and got people set up with different benefits and providers, just because people were reaching out and don't always know where to go. And I have to say, a lot of our websites, our internal programs can be kind of hard to navigate sometimes. So having the people there, I don't know what to do, I'm struggling, I'm in crisis, and then they reach out to one of our champions. But that's something that we really do struggle with, and it's one of our focus areas, is how to get the information out there about the benefits that are always there. So, great point.
Thanks, Chris. Jacobs has made a commitment to a diverse, qualified workforce. This includes incentives for those partners with whom they work. How does Jacobs work with the mental health check-in support? How does Jacobs work with the mental health check-in, support the advancement of the psychological safety on the job? In other words, how do you align, I think is what the question asks, your subcontractors and vendors to become aligned with what your mission is on psychological safety on the job site?
So I think you mentioned it yesterday, Jim, yesterday, psychological safety is a conversation we're having where you want to be able to bring your whole self to work. And especially when we have a diverse workforce, which is something we're all striving towards. And honestly, we can all do a little bit better of a job. And so this check-in tool, this is our second revision, so we've increased the language support. We've increased the accessibility for disabilities. We promote this throughout our employee networks that I mentioned. So these bringing the whole self to work, giving the support, but the anonymity, regardless of where you're from in your culture, you're able to maintain the anonymity, pull the data out, and see where people are struggling.
Which leads to the next question. You mentioned multiple mental health initiatives that Jacobs has rolled out, the calls, the groups, et cetera. Which one has moved the needle the most in your experience?
So we don't have the data for all of them. I'd say by far it's the Positive Mental Health Champion Network, because it's grown so vastly across the world and it's been embraced across the world. And so to have someone there to talk to has really made a big difference. The calls, I absolutely love the calls, of course, because those are topics that are challenging for people to feel comfortable talking about, and we take away that stigma. But just having someone to talk to peer-to-peer, just to say, hey, I'm not feeling great, and it's just a lot easier.
Is there a measurable difference between the mental health issues of remote workers, work from home folks, as compared to those in the office where there is more creative combustion?
So we don't have data on this, and again, we unfortunately rely on a lot of anecdotal information. We have a behavior-based safety observation program that we put into Intellects for us, and that gauges a little bit of the information. But yes, to answer your question, it is different between each, our workforce. Construction has completely different challenges, as we know, compared to somebody that's like me working in a basement, and I haven't seen this many people and I don't know how long, to people in the office where you have challenges with personalities and being face-to-face again. Some people love it, some people don't. So we've been rolling out different training programs, things like that, about hybrid working, and just from the feedback that we get from employees. And a lot of that does actually come through our Champions Network.
Is this OML system available for use by non-Jacobs construction companies and non-Jacobs subs? If so, how much does it cost to get involved, and how do we access it?
It doesn't cost anything. So you just reach out to me. Everybody in the world is allowed to use it. It's free for everybody. So if you want to have your organization and your subcontractors included in it, we just work with our team out of the UK, and we get your company's drop-downs added. So you can either have that option or just utilize it as non-Jacobs, and we can give you the data from our live dashboard.
So with that, Greg Palmer, let's get some information from her and push it out to everybody in a reasonable time today. Whatever you think, Amanda, needs to be shared with the crowd.
Absolutely.
We'll get all that access data. If you'll see Greg Palmer and get him what he needs, we'll push it out to everybody today. Excellent, thank you. Any questions from the audience? Just double checking. I see everybody still at their post. Good.
Oh, there's somebody over there.
Okay, we'll take it. Did I see a hand? Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you so much for the presentation this morning. Is there any way that this can be made available for us to use and potentially in a partnering environment?
Absolutely. Yes, we like to share all of our information. So that's part of getting the information out there and taking some of the roadblocks away from you to have the work already done for you. So absolutely.
I'll also remind you that the PowerPoint, not only from Amanda's presentation, but every PowerPoint that you see here that we're allowed to share is in the app. And I suppose this one is in the app also. You've allowed us to share it. So Greg will double check that. And if you access the app for the conference, you should be able to find this presentation and send it to whomever you please. We have another question here in the center. Thank you, Nicholas.
It's real easy. I just signed in and created an account and did a check-in, so.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you
Love
for
it.
sharing that. We appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So craft people tend to be very alpha male dominated. How do you really successfully promote this and get it out to the craft population and get them to engage?
So this is something we really have dealt with our maintenance field workers. And it's developing trust within your work group is what we found to be successful, and having a leader or somebody that would be considered an alpha to come forward and tell the story. And hey, I did this, it's okay. And being the one that's comfortable to take that first step in opening the door for people to feel comfortable talking about it. So the more that we can get our leaders comfortable talking about it, or somebody that's part of the organization, but there is that's the challenge of trust on, is this anonymous? It is. We'd love for you to use this. Same thing with the EAP providers. It can be a big challenge, but the more you talk about it and let people know that it's okay, and if somebody does have a challenge like we did with Glenn, and to say, I understand that you're struggling, I'm here for you, take the time that you need. Leading by example is huge when it comes to mental health. So even in a craft population.
Excellent. So we're a smaller organization than Jacobs. Most of us in the room is. Where in the world do we begin?
Exactly. So I think having a sprint would be delightful.
Consider it done.
No, because it is. It's overwhelming. And so if you just understand what your population is, if you have an EAP, ask them to give you the information on why people are utilizing the resources. Then you know where people are struggling, where you can put some of your information. But you can start with just taking that step and committing, and then we can help with the resources, because there's a lot of free information out there that's already set up for organizations. It's just hard to find. So I think if we, like I said, Health Action Alliance, we partner with them quite a bit. It's another organization that gives out information for free, and they're supported by the CDC.
Super. And there is a longtime CURT representative, Teresa Magnus. I'm not sure if she's in the room right now or not, but she's done a lot of fine work here, formerly with Southern Company, been the CEO of our small organization, smaller, less than $100 million organization, and she's now passionate about providing resources here. So many of you know Teresa. She's here at the conference. Tag her, and she can also be of assistance as well. Regarding the sprint team, let's just convene one. If you folks are interested in what Amanda has shared, especially getting started with a smaller organization and grappling with the 42% who've considered suicide of 18 to 25-year-olds. My word. And 57% of the 26 to 35. We've got a crisis on our hands. If you would like to be a part of, or be considered as a part of that sprint team, email me. It's real simple, gsizemore@curt.org, and we will collect that information, take it back to the office, work with Amanda, work with Jim, and see if that coalesces with our safety sprint, and if not, we'll convene another one. So gsizemore@curt.org is my email address. Send me an email, say I'm interested in the emotional wellness sprint team that was discussed at the conference, and we'll take it from there and get in touch with you. Another question. Have you considered, you have considered opening up your training programs to partner organizations. Am I right? You mentioned some of your partners. Who are some of those?
Oh, goodness. National Safety Council, Board of Certified Safety Professionals. I think many people received information from them about the world's biggest mental health check-in. We've got legislative bodies over in Europe, Mercedes. I'm on the spot. I got to try and remember all of them.
So a lot.
A lot.
And you can
I was
find
thinking
more
it was
about
on that one video, but it's not. It's on a different video at the end.
So you mentioned 8 different networks. Can you explain to us a little bit more in depth about what those networks are and why there are 8?
There are self-governed employee bodies. So we've got Women's Network, Harambe. We've got one for LGBTQ+, that's called PRISM, and LASE for Hispanic workers, VetNet that we have for our veterans. Jane, you're gonna have to help me on these, I was on the spot. There's one for new employees and people that need mentoring. I know.
You're doing great, I think. I don't know if I could...
No, but there's such a diverse workforce that you want people to be able to feel like they have a network to be a part of. And so joining, ACE for disability, so there's one more that I'm always forgetting. Yeah. So it's a good way to get information out there. We have positive mental health champions that are dedicated to each one of those networks because each network can have a different challenge when it comes to mental health. And so it's very collaborative. They do a lot of good work.
Obviously. Boy. There's a question out here. I don't see it. Where am I? Okay, right here. Jim, go ahead.
So mine's not a question. I just want to, Amanda, thank you.
Absolutely.
And thank Jacobs. And it takes leadership when we have issues like this, right? And I know how passionate Bob Brigada is, so it starts at the top. And I just wanted to say how much we appreciate you being here. I heard this discussion by Paul at the BSP. You were there too, Greg, with that, and then bringing it to our CURT members. And I think you've started to kind of ignite the needed fire for us to really take this seriously in our industry. And I just want to say great job, and I hope we take something from this and do something with it. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
There are a couple other questions that I think. Thank you, Jim, for that endorsement. Absolutely. We support it 100%. So what's next after next? Where are you going with this? This seems like an undertaking. The dog has caught the car, right? Now what?
It is. And so we're really expanding with well-being as a whole. So that was something that just started, like I said, last year, not just the mental health, but the whole person, physical, mental, or emotional, financial. There can be up to 7 pillars, actually. It depends on where you want to tackle it. But these are areas that we've seen people struggle. And so we want to be able to give them the resources and make it a little bit easier for them to understand this is all of me. It's not just mental health. And getting those resources out in a more manageable way. So that's huge. But on the mental health side, we really are focusing on the data. There's legislation in places like Australia and Europe on psychosocial risk and psychological safety. So we're going to be taking a more targeted approach, location to location, project to project, kind of looking at the data and seeing what the risks are, what's causing the stressors, and try and get ahead of it. While I love the peer-to-peer network of having people support you after the fact and be reactive, being proactive and trying to get ahead of what the risks are. But again, we need data, and it has to be systematic for that to really work.
One final question is, do you have an emergency response protocol to critical situations?
So we do, and it's the champions working with HR. So when I've had those critical interventions with people, it's very upsetting, but we get local enforcement involved to check on our employees, and we keep them on the phone, and kind of like a crisis management hotline. Wow. So if we can connect them to a hotline, because you can third party, even on Teams, call in 988 or your EAP and get somebody to crisis support with you there. Or there's the other way of calling 911 and using your HR department to be able to get the information to get the responders to that person's home. But the best thing is to keep them on the line, and it's a tough protocol for those of us that aren't trained, but it's worth it.
Great. And I want to support Jim's endorsement of, this is breakthrough, I believe. We're bringing what was once stigmatized into the mainstream and not necessarily normalizing it, but accepting it for what it is, the reality that our folks have challenges other than physical ones, and they need to be addressed accordingly. So let's show our appreciation once again for Amanda and for Jacobs. 1 million lives. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.